perpetuate that lie, because it is nothing more than a lie. It's nothing more than a distraction. You want to do criminal justice reform? Let's do criminal justice reform. You want to do bail reform, expungement? Do it. You want to do removing criminal records, arrest? Let's do it. Why does it have to be tied to commercializing a new industry? And the last thing I want to say on this, one of my favorite things on this, is how John Boehner, remember him? The Republican Majority Leader. Well, when I was in the Obama administration, we tried to work with, and we were working with many Republicans, including, by the way, Chuck Grassley. So if you get Chuck Grassley and Eric Holder to agree on anything, you probably have a good idea, okay? We're working with them on criminal justice reform with a mandatory minimum for crack and powder. And Grassley, one of the most conservative members, he's like the oldest conservative member of the Senate, was in favor of it, as well as Holder and DOJ. We were going to get it through, and it was John Boehner in the House who said, sorry, the Tea Party folks won't like it, we're not going to let it go forward. The minute he left office as Speaker, he became hired by the marijuana industry. So he's now making 6 figures from the pot industry, and he wouldn't even let us get through a relatively minor criminal justice reform. That shows you the hypocrisy, how it really is about money for a small number of people, frankly, already in power. Not bringing new people to power, already in power. And it's not about social justice.
Kevin, can you update us on what's going on at the federal level and how that might affect us in New York?
If anyone can tell me anything about the federal level, the Trump administration, now I will listen to you. I mean, it's no knock on anybody. There's some great people working there. This is not a high priority issue in Washington. There are a lot of people around the president, frankly, from Wall Street and others who think this is a good idea, libertarians. There are other people who don't think it's a good idea. And there's a lot, it's very, very murky. And Dave brings up a good point. We do have something, that little tiny thing called federal law, which sort of should matter. I know it's not really like on anybody's mind anymore, but it's kind of a thing, federal law. It's not being enforced, and it could be enforced, but it's not. We have to wait to see where this current Attorney General is on a lot of this stuff. But right now, I gotta just say there's not a lot of action, except the marijuana industry is trying to get banking access, which would be a disaster, because they would enter the U.S. financial system in that case. And they say it's because we don't want to operate in cash. Folks, if you've been to Colorado lately, I mean, Lynn can tell you, you can pay a credit card. That's the dirty little secret. They accept credit card. They find loopholes to do that. When you want to buy pot, it's not cash only. They're saying it's cash only, we need help because we're targets for robbery. First of all, you're a target for robbery because you sell a product that's worth 3 times its weight in silver. Is a jewelry store a target for robbery because they only take cash? No, they take credit, but they're still a target for robbery because they have a valuable product. That's why they're a target for robbery. That's why there are more crimes where there are pot shops. That's another reason why communities don't want them. So they want to get into the banking system. That's their focus right now, and we're really trying to stop them there. Thank you so much again. It was great. Appreciate it.
I was just wondering, you were talking about the governor's position on this, right, and it sounded like a lot of political speech you guys want to do.
Yeah, no, the governor's instincts were correct on this, that marijuana is harmful and it can be a gateway drug for some people, which he's right about. I don't think there's been any science in the last year to change that. In fact, every single major medical association is against legalization, including in New York. So, unfortunately, I think there have been a lot of faulty polls, a lot of bad information given to the governor, and I'm hoping that maybe he'll come around on this.
John, what do you think?
Well, we were really happy to see that this was pulled out of the budget process. In the course of the last 6 months, it's been really astonishing how many studies have been released, how many reports have come from other states that really are a cause for great concern, and we were really happy to see it out of the budget. And we're very concerned right now to make sure that all of these studies and all this information is part of the discussion moving forward.
Now, you were making a point about the big companies getting ready to come into New York, and is that really what it's all about in terms of
It is. It's really all about money for a small number of people. We've seen that Altria, which is Philip Morris, has invested billions. We also have seen that Constellation Brands, which is the major branding for the alcohol industry, has invested billions in Canada in this. They're really waiting. New York will be a huge market for them. California is totally saturated, so they would love to come to New York. and I worry about that. It's not going to be about small businesses. It's really going to be about money for these big guys.
And the talk we're hearing about somehow benefiting the low-income minority community, this is a smokescreen?
Everywhere we've seen marijuana legalization implemented, it's hurt minority communities more than other communities. There's a concentration of marijuana stores in those communities. Property values go down, crime around those pot shops go up, and there's less investment in those communities, even if people think that, you know, the marijuana revenue is going to help them. The revenue is pennies. It doesn't pay for itself, let alone the, you know, giving any benefit. So we really see how that's hurt minority communities. That's why many communities have voted against. In fact, the majority of Colorado towns have voted against marijuana pot shops in their communities.
And you also raised the public safety issue in terms of people who are intoxicated on marijuana driving buses.
Huge issue with driving. In fact, I should have mentioned, of course, that we're just finding out that the driver who killed 20 people, including himself, the leaked toxicology report showed significant amounts of, we think, recent marijuana use. We don't want to jump to conclusions. We have to look at that tox report. But there weren't any other drugs in his system other than a trace of anti-seizure medication, which wouldn't have caused impairment. So we're still looking at that, but the car crash issue is huge. It's why AAA and every driving safety group is very concerned about marijuana driving.
John, where do you see this issue going in New York? There's stories today that they're trying to get the caucus members of the legislature to get on board with this now.
Well, I think there's a significant number of people in the legislature, Long Island, Westchester, and elsewhere in the state, that are really hearing a lot from their constituents. I think there's others who have voiced a concern in the Albany area, who've voiced a concern about young people, the impact on young people. A lot of concern that a lot of details still haven't been worked out, and it's really important that we not rush forward without really seriously considering all the different dimensions of this issue.
Now, why do you think the governor rushed forward on this? Do you agree with what he said, that it was a matter of expediency?
Well, I think there was an attempt, I think, strategically, that it's much easier to move a policy through as part of the budget discussions. I think it was really a matter of expediency, and also I think some legislators would favor it, frankly, going through the budget process, so it's a little bit less visibility on the issue. I think it's much more difficult when it's discussed as a standalone item.
For you too, do you think that it's inevitable that it's going to be legalized?
I don't think it's inevitable. They thought a lot of things were inevitable, and they weren't. In many states, they've tried to vote on this every year, and they can't get the votes. New Jersey should have legalized it if it was inevitable. So I don't think it's inevitable. I think that there are enough communities pushing back. Suffolk and on Long Island, the counties have pushed back already on this. Others have as well. So I don't think it's inevitable at all.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you. Lives and have healthier communities. You know, this issue of legalizing marijuana is like one of the pressing policy issues right now that we think has a direct impact on that agenda.
So here to really talk about, there's a lot of myths with regards to marijuana. You know, this isn't your Woodstock weed of the 60s. It's much more harmful than it is now. There are major business interests who want to make money and get rich if marijuana becomes legal. And the legalization initiatives that are being put forward in New York would commercialize overnight 99% edibles, these gummy bears, cookies, candies, dabs, waxes, vapes. It's not your old, sort of joint. And we're here to raise awareness on that.
Now, I guess the people would say that the money revenue that you would get from marijuana would be a good thing. What would your response be?
The money is a drop in the bucket, except a 0.17% of the entire budget of New York State. It wouldn't be paying for schools or roads or transportation infrastructure. They just did a big, major Colorado teacher strike a month ago, even 5 years after legalization. So the money hasn't helped there. It wouldn't help here. And there are also a lot of costs. Costs to enforcement. Drug driving is a huge issue. You have to hire more officers who can detect marijuana impaired driving. There's an issue of retraining police dogs. That costs money. There's an issue of, in schools, in Colorado, marijuana is the number one offense at schools. You have to enforce those regulations and laws. There's setting up an entire bureaucracy as well. The state would have to do that. Costs money. So there are a lot of costs that would really overtake any revenue. And the revenue is pennies.
The other thing is that we're very concerned that the governor and the legislature would consider diverting any tax from legalized marijuana to any purpose other than good public health education to teach the public of the facts about marijuana, to provide excellent prevention to prevent underage use, to prevent any problematic use, to provide treatment for people who develop a substance use disorder related to their marijuana use, and recovery supports for people who are in recovery from problematic marijuana use. So the idea of having a tax on legalized marijuana that doesn't pay for that kind of infrastructure would be very similar to the neglectful policies that we had in pushing in a major way prescription opioids without having the infrastructure to help people who clearly would have a dependence on it. So we're very concerned that we're headed down the wrong path and we're going to be making some of the same mistakes we've made in other areas of public health.
Can you discuss a little bit about some of the health risks involved regarding marijuana? Like, if you smoke a joint, what's the issue, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the marijuana and what would be legalized isn't just a joint with 4% THC. It's these edibles, these gummies, candies, lollipops that can up to 99% THC, especially these vapes. With the vapes that a lot of, especially young people are using, you can disguise your use. You don't really know what they're using. You often don't even know what's in these cartridges. You do know that it's highly potent, but you don't know what else is in it. So there are personal health harms with regards to lungs, with regards to secondhand. If you are smoking, is another huge issue. We've made so much progress on tobacco in the state, and we really feel like we'd be going backwards if we legalize marijuana, legitimizing another industry, furthering secondhand use. Also, of course, issues with heart and lung. Unlike alcohol or tobacco, marijuana, THC especially, has an acute impact on mental health, specifically schizophrenia, psychosis, depression, anxiety. And we've seen studies that have, especially recently, that have found increased incidence in this. I'm very worried about mental health. I'm also worried about learning. I'm worried about cognition. I'm worried about IQ. I'm worried about memory. All these things are really important for really anyone under 30 whose brain is still developing. And that's a huge concern.
I think the whole issue that we're really concerned about is particularly for young people. We know they have a developing brain, and we know that the rate of substance use disorders will be twice for young people what it would be for folks that are older. We're estimating that about 8 to 10% of the folks who are adults who use will develop a substance use disorder specifically and exclusively related to their marijuana use. So they'll have a marijuana use disorder. For young people, that number would be doubled. 16 to 20% of the folks who are younger would develop a disorder that would really need some kind of treatment.
Good.
You said psychosis before, right? What is psychosis?
So, basically an acute panic attack. Because today's marijuana is so much more harmful, and oftentimes people ingest it, you don't feel it right away. It takes about 20 minutes to feel an edible, like a candy or gummy bear. And so we've seen increased calls to both poison centers in Colorado and other legal states, as well as emergency room admissions, where people voluntarily admit themselves because they think they've ingested something poisonous. The reality is they've ingested pure THC, and it has affected them in a way that they've never been affected by a regular joint. So it's really buyer beware in a lot of legal states, and I think a lot of the lawmakers aren't really distinguishing between the old marijuana and the new marijuana, which is causing all these problems.
Yeah, is there anything else you guys like to add?
I don't think so. I got to run. Good. Thanks. Awesome.
John,
Thanks a
great
lot.
seeing you. Thank you, gentlemen.
We have here as national experts talking to us about a range of issues affecting young people and people across the life spectrum. So we're looking at things like alcohol, underage use, marketing, and what kind of a positive prevention message can be sent to reduce underage drinking and other harmful uses of alcohol. The same can be said for marijuana and other drugs, prescription medications, etc. We have experts here who provide prevention services in schools and communities across New York State. They're here to hear from national experts